once I started having panic attacks, the first, I'd never had a panic attack before. And the first time it happens, 2 a.m. in our bed, and we thought I was having a heart attack. And that's when he realized, okay, something is wrong here.
Welcoming a new baby into the family is a special time of excitement and joy. But for millions of women, it can also bring on powerful emotions of fear and anxiety. While most new moms experience baby blues after childbirth, 10 to 20% of new moms experience a more severe, long-lasting form of depression known as postpartum depression. On this episode of Girl We Need to Talk, television news anchor Danielle Lerner explains what triggered her postpartum and what methods she used to be happy, healthy, and whole again. My father died on June 20th, 2018. I was 37 years old, and suddenly everything I knew about myself was uprooted. I had so many questions, and there were so many layers to peel back. Who was my daddy? And who am I as a result? What was his legacy? And what will mine be? My mantra for 2019 was happy, healthy, whole. I was determined to face my grief and heal. And my girls were there with me every single step of the way. I found strength in my vulnerability, and we had open, honest, transparent conversations. And that's what we're gonna do here in this space. So grab your journal, light some candles, pour a glass of wine, and get cozy. Because girl, we need to talk. I'm Charity Bailey. Thank you so much for tuning in once again to Girl We Need to Talk. And Danielle, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Charity. It's always great to see you, but especially under these circumstances, and to really get to talk about an issue that is very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, and you talk about it so openly. You actually reached out to me and said that it was something that you'd like to discuss, and you're very transparent about your journey. So let's talk about the moment that you realized that you had postpartum depression and not necessarily just a case of baby blues.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't say there was necessarily a specific moment. In hindsight, it's always 2020. I can see that this was building for some time. And so we believe that I might have had it after my first daughter was born and just passed it off as new mom anxiety and kind of those normal emotions and scenarios that everybody goes through. But now looking back at it, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I had it and it just went untreated for almost a little over 2 years until my second daughter, Harper, was born. And so I think the moments that really made me realize, and those around me realize, because it was actually people around me who noticed it first, was just this incredible paralyzing anxiety and this deep sadness that went with it, and not understanding why I was feeling that way. I had dealt with anxiety before, but never to this degree. And so I actually started having full-blown panic attacks, which I didn't know what those were at first. But those panic attacks and then just intrusive thoughts, that's really when my husband and I sat down and realized, okay, something bigger is going on here and we need to seek professional help.
So we did an Instagram poll, and it's interesting that you mentioned anxiety. So 59% of women said that they have experienced postpartum depression, while 41% said no. And then some folks DM'd me separately, right? So they didn't think that their level of anxiety was postpartum depression. Some of the feedback was that they didn't experience it because they set up community around them doing things that they love doing so that they could get back to themselves immediately. Some said they suffered in silence. Some said it was a mild case of baby blues, but that they realize now that it may have been postpartum. How do you know if you are dealing with postpartum depression or not?
Well, I think it's important. I always say when I speak about this that I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor. I can only speak to my own personal experience. And you're right. Most women do go through some form of baby blues because of that hormonal shift shortly after baby's born. But usually within a couple weeks, that should ease at least a little bit. And so I think it can be different for everybody. I think what I've learned in researching postpartum depression and anxiety and all of the other, they call them perinatal mood disorders, all of those other mood disorders that can go with this can really span the gamut as far as symptoms, as far as how strong those symptoms are. And so the way that I like to describe it is, obviously it's going to be overwhelming welcoming a new person into your family. I mean, that's just how it's going to be, right? And there's a lot of physical things happening, especially with mom. But when it gets to the point where it's starting to feel impossible, or you're starting to feel yourself wanting to run away, that was a big flag for me with anxiety, was that it was getting to the point where I didn't want to hold my baby. I didn't want to be around my baby. And I really started thinking, gosh, it would probably be better if they just did this without me. Like, I can't handle this. This is too much. My husband will be fine. So those types of intrusive thoughts start coming in. And that's different than, I'm sleep deprived, I'm stressed because I don't know what I'm doing. So I think that's a big red flag, is if you start feeling yourself detaching, or you start feeling resentment toward your baby. Or some women go the other way, where they really hang on to their baby and don't let anybody near them or the baby. So there can be extremes. There can be, it just really goes in all sorts of different directions. So my advice is always, if you feel like your emotions are overwhelming you, it never hurts to reach out to your doctor, just to check in and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. And they can give you better guidance as far as, okay, maybe this is baby blues, maybe this is something more. But check in with your provider, and keep checking in with your provider if you at any point feel like maybe these emotions are more overwhelming than they maybe should be.
Well, you mentioned the extremes, and that's the thing. I think that when the conversation happens, a lot of times it's more so the fact that, oh, I hate everything about this baby and what it's brought into my life. But that other side of it. So in the next episode, Dominique Sensabaugh talks about the fact that she thought people were going to steal her baby. Well, one of my friends on Instagram said the same thing. She's like, I don't even want my husband to touch the baby sometimes. I'm scared he's going to drop him. But they know that this is like not a normal thought and that it's far off, but they just can't fight it.
Yeah. And again, I can't necessarily speak to what that feels like, because I went the other way. But it's really amazing what the biology of giving birth and the emotions, when those come together, the scenarios that they can create. Now, I'd say for those women that you just mentioned, the fact that they know, okay, that's not necessarily reality, and they can separate themselves from that, is huge. Because I think if you can do that, you're at least in a better spot. Because my husband always says he's so grateful that I recognized that my thoughts, my behaviors, that there was something wrong. And so therefore I was open to seeking help and treatment. But some women don't know that they're having these types of thoughts, or that what they're feeling or thinking isn't necessarily reality. And that's where my heart just breaks, because I know there are families going through this right now who either don't realize they're going through it, who don't have the resources to help themselves get through it. And so that's why we've tried to be really open about our experience, just in case it flags something for another family that may be going through something like that right now.
Yeah. My sister went through postpartum depression with her second daughter. And so before having her son, she put all of the systems in place that she possibly could, so that she was ready. Now, you are now pregnant with your third. How do you deal with your girls now?
Yeah. So I say, full transparency, we did not go into a third pregnancy lightly. This was definitely something that we talked to each other about. We talked to my doctor about. We talked to the therapist that I worked with about, because once you have it, there's a good chance that you'll at least have some of those feelings again. It's just, you're predisposed to it at that point. And so, it sounds like we've done the same thing as your sister. Baby's coming in October. And so I've made sure to touch base with my doctor. I've touched base with some postpartum support that we're going to bring in to help us this time that we didn't last time. I am much more in tune with my own emotions and how I'm feeling, thanks to the therapy I went through this last time. And so I can already see that helping during this pregnancy versus my other two. And so I think the biggest difference now with my girls, as opposed to the past, is things are crazy and stressful. But I've learned that it's a season, that this moment that you're in right now that feels real hard and you're real stressed and you're real anxious, that's going to pass. And then you'll move on to the next thing, whatever that is, because there's always going to be a next thing.
How is your relationship with your daughters?
I think it's great. I mean, they seem to love me, so I think we're doing great.
They ain't put you out yet.
No, they haven't, gone on Facebook and like blasted me for telling them they can't wear something yet. But it's amazing the difference that I felt actually with my older daughter once I had gone through the therapy and done the work when I was in postpartum, with my second daughter. It made me realize that for probably the first year and a half of her life, I mean, of course, I loved her and wanted to do everything for her, but I was almost going through the motions of caring for her, but I wasn't in it with her. And so that's been the biggest change, is just that desire to want to be with them and in moments with them and connect with them and bond with them. And so in a way, as much as I would never wish that type of an experience on anybody, I'm grateful for our journey because I feel like it helped me reconnect with my older daughter and learn how to have that bond with your child. And that's something that I never take for granted because I know there was a time where I didn't feel that way. And it's a huge difference. And so, I mean, God bless them. They get on my nerves like crazy. And I'm sure they will for the rest of our lives. But just this bond and that connection, that's what I love the most. And like I said, I'm so grateful for it because I know there's been times in both of their lives where I haven't felt that way.
Well, also, I think it provides hope for other women who are experiencing postpartum depression right now, that like it speaks to the fact that it will pass and you will reconnect with your child. It's just going to take some working it out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in some of the research I did on this topic, I went to a couple of peer support groups at one of the local hospitals here. And the doctor who runs that, the psychologist who runs that, said it's amazing with women that you don't even have to necessarily, if you put a bunch of moms in a room, there doesn't have to be this instructional, this is how you hold a baby. This is how, she said it's amazing. They'll just start doing it and people will notice what they're doing and kind of emulate that and, connect with what certain people are doing. And it's just that sense of community and that support. And so, for me, when I first started feeling these feelings, I remembered one of my former coworkers had gone through postpartum anxiety with her baby. And I remember her telling me what that was like. And at the time it went over my head and I feel horrible that she told me, and I was just like, oh man, that's awful, and just moved on. But because she had told me that, I remembered that when I started feeling something similar, and that flagged me of, oh, this is what she was talking about. And I immediately reached out to her and she said, yep, that's exactly, okay, this is what you need to do, XYZ, and really helped guide me on how to get through this. And I've relied on other women too during my recovery. I mean, I have a woman in my phone named Michelle. I don't even know her last name and I've never met her, but she was passed to me from a friend of a friend of a friend. And I would text her at midnight when I was, in my closet pumping and just letting the emotions go and being brutally honest, because I knew she knew that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't this horrible person, but she could understand what I was going through. And I still keep in touch with her. And she went on to have more kids and she's fine. And so it's just amazing, that power of just hearing from other women, even if you don't even really know them.
I love that you said that, because one of your colleagues currently told me that you helped her prepare for what she's feeling now because she just had a baby as well. And I think that's so big, because someone poured into you and now you're pouring into other people. And it kind of just goes back to this thing of, you're not alone, you're not going crazy, you're not abnormal.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you are in that space, you feel very alone. You feel very shamed. You feel a lot of guilt. and you don't want to vocalize some of what you're feeling because it sounds crazy, and you know it. You know that what you're saying doesn't make sense. And so it's very easy to just try to bottle it up and pretend like everything's fine, and that just makes it exponentially worse. And so I always try, when I know someone's having a baby, to just shoot them a note every once in a while. How are you doing? How's the baby? How are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling physically? And just checking in with them and kind of giving them the ability and the freedom to, hey, literally text me anytime, call me anytime. And I've had some women do that.
Support is key. So, what role did your husband play in all of this? And how did all of this impact him and your relationship and your household and all of it?
Yeah, so I'm biased, but my husband, he's amazing. He is just our rock. And so I'll be honest though, in the beginning, after Harper was born and I started not wanting to get up for feedings and not wanting to do a lot with her, he was really frustrated because he's looking at it as, I'm working full time still. You're on maternity leave. Why am I doing all of this? And at the time, it still didn't register to either of us that something more would be wrong. So it created some tension, on top of the tension that already exists when you bring a newborn into your house. And because that's just gonna happen. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
And then, once I started having panic attacks, the first, I'd never had a panic attack before. And the first time it happened, 2 a.m. in our bed, and we thought I was having a heart attack. And so he was going to take me to the ER, but I didn't want to bring my babies to the ER at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's when he realized, okay, something is wrong here. And he admits it. He had kind of passed it off before as like, okay, I get it. You're emotional. This is hard, but come on. He's very much a, pull up your laces and go type guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think
get it together.
Totally. Like, come on, we don't have a choice. Like, we just have to do this. But I think once he saw the physical toll that it was taking, he realized, okay, something is wrong. And he was all about therapy. And, I went the medication route because that worked for us. And he was very supportive in all of that because he knew that it wouldn't just help me, but it would help the entire family. And so I think coming out of that, we have just built a stronger relationship, and realizing that, when you say I do, it's to the good and the bad. And so, that's a scenario I hope we never have to venture into again, but he was definitely one of the biggest supporters and very open now to also sharing our story as well. Because he talks about how, especially with dads, yes, you can't feel those emotions that your wife is feeling. It's just, or, your partner, you can't feel those emotions. And so it's really hard, even to this day, when I tell him some of the intrusive thoughts that I had during that time, or talk to him about how I was feeling. It's really hard for him to even understand that, because he's never ever thought about, well, what if I ran away tomorrow? What, that would probably be better. Or, oh, my kids would be better off with a different parent because I can't do it. It's hard for him to understand that.
You talked about your anxiety. You mentioned having panic attacks. But when you reached out to me, you said that learning more about the anxiety and the panic attacks and all of that is what helped you kind of come full circle with something else you were dealing with in binge eating.
Yeah. So for many, many, many years, I'm not going to say how many, because it's going to say how old I am, but for many years, I've struggled with weight. Weight has always been something that I have fixated on for years. And I know you and I talked about kind of the irony of going into an industry that is very hyper focused on appearance and certain standards. And so I've been very focused on that for years. And for a while there, I was struggling with binge eating. And it's a catch-22 when you do that, right? Because you're doing it because you're anxious and you want to check out, but then you're upset with yourself for doing it because it's completely, taking you away from your weight loss goals, and kind of that cycle. And so I dealt with that for a while, and actually saw a therapist for that for probably about a year before I got pregnant with my older daughter. And I never realized that binge eating was an anxiety, an offshoot of anxiety. And so once I realized that, and then went through my postpartum experience, it very much felt like everything was connected in a way. That underlying anxiety, that underlying self-criticism and negative thoughts and intrusive thoughts that you think about when you're really struggling with body image and weight were very similar to the feelings I felt going through postpartum. And so it was really eye-opening for me when I went through my therapy for postpartum, that all of these things started coming up from years ago, that I didn't realize how they had impacted.
Well, we are the sum of all of our parts. So it makes sense that it was all connected. Interestingly enough, though, I mean, you're talking about body image and anxiety, the panic attacks, the binge eating. You still show up for hundreds of thousands of people every single night. What was it like dealing with postpartum and then still having to show up, even though you were dealing with, body image and all the other things that were going on with you?
Yeah. So when I was officially diagnosed with postpartum depression and anxiety, I was 6 weeks away from going back to work. And my first thought was, there's no way I can go back to work if I feel even a fraction of this, because we weren't just talking about, oh, I'm fine, I'm just a little off. This was like, I can't even drive by a Target without feeling anxiety at the thought of going in. I mean, just, And so, and everyone told me, you're way ahead of yourself. Just take it 1 week at a time. We'll see how it goes. And so thankfully, by the time I was supposed to go back to work, I was feeling much better. Not 100%, but I was able to kind of put on that face and to feel somewhat confident that I could handle everything. But I still didn't feel myself. And so that was hard. And I was making mistakes that thankfully never made them onto the air, but that brain fog was still there. Trying to balance everything and not get stressed out was still there. Second guessing myself a lot was still happening. And just thankfully over time, I got even better and was at a much better place. And so when the time came where I had this idea to do a series on postpartum depression, I had pitched it to my manager, but I told him, let's wait a couple more months. I'm too scared to go to, the higher ups. And he kind of looked at me and said, okay, whatever you're comfortable with. And in my mind, it was this thought of, well, if my bosses know that I went through a mental health issue, if they know that I'm on medication, I mean, they're not going to trust me anymore. They're going to second guess me. They're going to think I can't do my job. And viewers, oh my gosh, they're going to think they can't trust me on the anchor desk because I've been. So basically all of the stereotypes I'm trying to bust through were all there. And I eventually just kind of said, you know what, I feel called to do this. Let's do it. And the support was obviously more than I ever could have imagined. They've been wonderful. And they've been so supportive on me talking about this in different outlets, as long as I'm okay with it and I'm comfortable with it. But it was really hard there in the beginning of trying to pretend like everything was okay when I knew it still wasn't, but not wanting to tell people what had happened because I was nervous about how they might respond.
Well, the thing is, people think that because you're on television that you don't have the same insecurities or face the same issues. And that's not true, because what you said is exactly what other people say about facing mental health issues in general. They're like, well, I'm an attorney. If I tell them that I'm feeling this way, then maybe they won't trust me with these cases. I'm a teacher. They won't trust me with the children, and there's all of these things, but it's like, maybe they can step up and help you in the midst of it. And you sharing your story has helped so many people. I can't stress that enough. What is the game plan for baby number 3?
Well, obviously I'm open to the unexpected, because if there's anything I've learned going through this twice, it's that you plan and then something else happens and you just replan. But, kind of like I mentioned before, I've been in touch with my doctors very, very closely. going to, setting up a therapy session before baby comes and having some on the books already after she comes, just as check-ins. We're actually going to work with a postpartum doula for after baby comes to help us out for a few weeks and just transitioning as a family, an extra set of hands. We're lucky that both of our families are here. And so we're going to be utilizing them and just kind of front loading ourselves with help on the front end. Because I think in hindsight, and we have a wonderful community. I mean, we have people bringing us meals for like the first month after baby's born. I mean, we have a wonderful community. But I think this last time we grossly underestimated how hard it would be for me to be home with a newborn and a 2-year-old all day, every day, by myself, 5 days a week. And this time we're going in with, okay, this can be really hard. We're going to keep the girls in their, normal daycare preschool routine 3 days a week so that will, keep them on their routine. So we're just thinking about that postpartum period so much more than we ever did. So I would say we both know things are going to be hard, but there's a next stage. We will get through it and we will be fine.
For those of us who are watching and maybe around someone who's experiencing postpartum depression, what is your advice for us in supporting that woman? And what are some resources that you found helpful?
So I would say, honestly, I think the simplest and best thing that you can do is to just find ways to connect with her, whether that's visiting in person occasionally, or even just a simple text. Hey, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And asking her those pointed questions. How are you feeling emotionally? Which seems like, oh, that's a really formal question. But sometimes that's all someone needs to open the door and say, you know what, I'm actually struggling. This is really hard. And just listen, we had people bringing us meals. We had some of our family and really close friends would come and hang out, bring their kids so that my older ones could play, and just finding ways to have that connection in that community. As far as resources, I always push people to Postpartum Support International, PSI. They're a wonderful organization, and their website has some of the most comprehensive information I've seen on postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum in dads and other caregivers, resources for family members and loved ones of the person who's going through it, and also resources for that person who may be going through it. And they have a warm line where you can actually call them and leave a message, and someone will get back to you within, I think it's 36 to 48 hours, and direct you to resources in your exact area.
Well, thank you for the information. Thank you for the conversation. And I really appreciate you for reaching out to me because, again, it's something that so many women are dealing with and don't always have the support, don't always know how to deal with it or where to even start to even reach out for help. So thank you so much. Did you bring your glass? And we got a baby bottle around there somewhere?
I sure did. I've really been craving grapefruit juice for some reason. So I have this like grapefruit orange concoction that makes me feel like I'm doing something fun. So I have that.
Okay, well, listen, Auntie is over here on the tea, but what I will do is find that concoction, add some Blanco tequila to it later.
Yes. Now we're talking. Call me on like October 20th and we'll be good to go.
I got you. First drink on me.
I love it. I'm going to hold you to that too.
Yes, I'm so serious. Yes, let's do it.
Yes.
So cheers to baby number 3, my friend.
Thank you so much, Charity. Thank you for having me and for taking time to talk about this issue. I appreciate you.
Yes, absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
On the next Girl We Need to Talk.
I'll never be that person I was August 28th, 2017. That's the day before my first son was born. Because August 29th, I was a brand new woman. Never been a person. Same thing with each child. Every time a new child came into the picture, I'm a brand new person. And I never wanted to be back like I was. I wanted to slay forward. I wanted to progress, and I wanted to grow, and I wanted to believe in the new woman that I was. And I had to trust that I was going to get to that space I wanted to be. I just had to trust the process.
Thank you for watching Girl We Need to Talk. You can find me across all social media platforms at Miss Charity Bailey. Make sure you like and subscribe.